The sun was dipping behind the walls of Greyhaven, painting the sky in shades of red that reminded me too much of dried blood on a blade. I stood on the balcony of the Great Hall, gazing down at the training yard where human soldiers were raising their shields for the third time that week. To the north, faint plumes of smoke still rose from the border villages, a grim reminder that the war with the orcs had dragged on for nearly a decade. No one could recall who fired the... All we knew was that if it continued, this winter would see both sides starving before the swords even fell. My name is Cale Arden. I'm 25, the only son of Lord Roderick Arden, who rules the entire southern plains along the Vale of Wind River. I've spent my life in Greyhaven's shadow, learning to wield a sword, manage the estates, and bury the dead. The fortress has been my world, its stone walls both protector. I've led patrols, negotiated grain supplies, and watched friends return in shrouds. But I've never ventured far beyond our lands, never seen the orc clan's mountains up close. War has a way of shrinking your horizons. That evening, my father summoned me to his chambers. The room was dimly lit by a single hearth fire, casting long shadows over maps strewn across the table. He looked older than his years, his beard more gray than black. "Sit, Cale," he said, his voice rough like gravel under boots. I obeyed, sensing the gravity in his tone. "The orcs have sent an envoy," he began without preamble. "Chief Thornfang of the Stonefang clan has agreed to a peace treaty. No more raids, no more burned fields, trade routes reopened." I leaned forward, hope flickering in my chest for the first time in months. That's what we've fought for, Father. When do we sign?" He met my gaze steadily. "There's a condition. They demand a marriage to seal the bond. My son, and their daughter." The words hit me like a warhammer. Marriage? To an orc? I stared at him, my mind reeling. "Why me?" "Because you're the one they trust not to break your word. You've never been one for deceit, Cale, and as my heir it binds our houses irrevocably." I ran a hand through my hair, trying to process it. This wasn't about love or alliance for prosperity. It was refuse, and the fighting resumes. More graves, more famine. But an orc bride? The very thought sent a chill through me. I'd heard the stories. Green-skinned warriors with tusks and unbreakable strength. Savages who lived for battle. How could I share my life, my home with one? "Who is she?" I asked finally. "Vila Thornfang, daughter of their great warlord. Rumors say she led her first raid at 18, never lost a duel. She's no delicate, but that's why they chose her, to ensure the peace holds." I nodded numbly, excusing myself to the balcony again. The night air was crisp, carrying the distant howl of wind through the plains. Vela Thornfang. The name echoed in my mind like a battle drum. I pictured her, towering, armored, with eyes that had seen more death than I could imagine. And me? I'd trained in the yards, led small skirmishes, but my hands were more accustomed to quills and ledgers than endless slaughter. What kind of union could this be? A farce, a chain binding two enemies. That night, sleep evaded me. I paced my chambers, the stone floor cold under my feet. Memories flooded in. Burying my childhood friend after an orc ambush, watching my mother waste away from grief during the early years of the war. If this marriage ended the bloodshed, was it worth it? Or was I condemning myself to a life of suspicion and resentment? By dawn, I had no answers, only resolve. For Greyhaven, for the people who'd look to me as heir, I'd do it. The wedding, if you could call it that, took place 2 days later in the fortress courtyard. No chapels, no flowers, no feasts, just two delegations facing each other under a gray sky. Our soldiers lined the walls, hands on hilts, while the orc envoy, a small group of armored figures, stood stoic on the opposite side. My father read the treaty terms aloud. Borders respected, raids ceased, mutual aid in famine. The words blurred in my ears, drowned by the pounding of my heart. Then she arrived. The gates creaked open, and Vela Thornfang strode through on foot, flanked by 2 orc guards who soon departed. She was taller than I'd imagined, easily half a head above me, her skin a deep green like moss on ancient stone. Her black hair was tied high, revealing small tusks curving from her lower jaw. No gown for her, just battle armor, scarred and practical, with a Her eyes swept the courtyard like a general assessing a battlefield, sharp, unyielding, missing nothing. As my father concluded the rites, a simple oath of binding, she stepped forward. The air grew thick with tension. I heard murmurs from our men, grips tightening on spears. Up close, she smelled of earth and leather, a far cry from the perfumed ladies of our court. The ceremony ended with a nod from both sides. Viola turned to me, her voice low and steady. I do not belong to you, but I will stay for peace. I met her gaze, forcing the words out. I will too. It was our first vow. No romance, no tenderness, just raw truth. As she walked away to her assigned quarters, I wondered if this fragile pact would hold or shatter us both. The sun set red again that night, and I feared the blood it foretold. The very next day after the ceremony, Viola moved into Grey. I watched from the battlements as her small entourage, 2 orc warriors carrying modest packs, approached the gates. No grand caravan, no chests of dowry treasures, just her, striding forward with the same armored confidence she'd shown during the vows. The guards eyed them warily, but my father's orders were clear. She was to be treated as lady of the house. I met her in the courtyard, feeling the weight of curious stares from... Welcome to your new home, I said, trying to sound neutral. It came out stiffer than intended. She glanced around the stone walls, her green eyes taking in the banners fluttering in the wind. This is not my home, but it is where I stay. Her voice was steady, accented but clear in the common tongue. I nodded, leading her inside. The great hall was vast, with high ceilings and tapestries depicting my ancestors' victories, many against orcs. As we walked, her gaze lingered on one particularly vivid scene, a human knight slaying an orc chieftain. Those people killed my ancestors, she remarked flatly without anger, as if stating the weather. And your ancestors killed mine, I replied, meeting her eyes. I wasn't trying to provoke her. It was just the truth. For a moment, she studied me, as if weighing whether I had the spine to acknowledge it. Then she gave a slight nod and continued walking. The tour continued through the corridors, past the kitchens where cooks paused their work to gawk, and up to the private quarters. Viola didn't comment much, but her posture spoke volumes. Rigid, alert, like she was mapping escape routes rather than settling in. In the armory, she ran a finger over a sword rack. Your weapons are light, good for speed, but brittle against our axes. We adapt, I said. She hummed in response, not dismissively, but thoughtfully. The cultural clashes began almost immediately. At supper that first evening, in the hall with my father and a few nobles, Viola entered without the expected curtsy. She sat at the high table, her armor clinking against the chair, and reached for bread without waiting for grace. The ladies whispered behind their hands. Barbarian, one murmured just loud enough. A young knight, bold from wine, stared openly at her tusks, smirking as if daring her to notice. I saw her shoulders tense, her hand inching toward her dagger, but she didn't react. Instead, she tore into the bread methodically, ignoring them. Inside, I felt a spark of irritation. Not at her, but at them. This was the price of peace, yet they treated her like an intruder. Enough, I said quietly to the knight, who averted his eyes. That night, the real test came. Tradition, my room, our room now, was spacious, with a massive 4-poster bed, a hearth crackling with fire, and windows overlooking the river. Viola entered last, her pack slung over one shoulder. She stopped at the door, her hand resting on her dagger's hilt. I'll sleep on the floor if needed, she said, her eyes narrowing. I shook my head. No. The bed is large enough for 2 without issues. I won't touch you. She watched me for a long moment, as if she set her pack down but kept the dagger close, lying on the far edge of the bed, fully clothed in her armor. I turned away, extinguishing the candles, and lay on my side. The silence was thick, broken only by the fire's pops. I wondered if she slept with one eye open. if she saw me as a potential threat. Sleep came fitfully for me, haunted by the strangeness of it all. The following days blurred into a routine. Vila shadowed me during my duties, not out of affection, but curiosity, or perhaps vigilance. We rode out to inspect the wheat fields, where farmers bowed awkwardly in her presence. "Your lands are fertile," she observed, dismounting to touch the soil. "But your people look thin." "War takes its toll," I replied. At the stables, she examined the horses, noting their speed but fragility compared to orc mounts. In the forge, she watched the smiths hammer steel, her expression approving. "You are not rich," she said one afternoon as we overlooked the modest village below the fortress. "Not poor enough to starve," I countered. She nodded. "Good. My people respect those who live without excess." It was in these moments that I began to see beyond the warrior facade. Vela wasn't the mindless brute from tavern tales. She asked pointed questions about our irrigation systems, our trade routes, practical things that showed a mind sharpened by survival, not just battle. She didn't complain about the stares or whispers, but I noticed how her jaw tightened each time. The breaking point came during a routine check at a border outpost. As we rode through a nearby village, a crowd gathered. At first, it was curious murmurs, but then a voice shouted, "Monster!" Others joined. "Go back to your mountains!" "Filthy orc!" Stones weren't thrown. Vila halted her horse, her face impassive. But I saw the flicker in her eyes, pride warring with restraint. "Will you silence them?" she asked me quietly. I shook my head. "No, but I'll stand with you." I dismounted and positioned myself beside her, facing the crowd. "This is Lady Vela, your lady now. The war ends because of her. Show respect." The villagers quieted, some shuffling away shamefaced. As we rode on, her posture relaxed slightly. That night, back in our chambers, she didn't reach for her dagger immediately. Instead, she removed her outer armor, sitting by the fire in simpler garb. We didn't speak much, but the silence felt less hostile. For the first time, I found myself curious about her, not as an orc, but as Vela. What had she left behind? What battles had shaped her? As I drifted to sleep, I realized this arrangement might not. Autumn arrived with a chill that seeped into the bones, turning the leaves of the Valowin forests into a tapestry of gold and crimson. The peace treaty had held for a few months now, but it felt as fragile as the first frost, beautiful from afar, but liable to crack under pressure. Greyhaven bustled with preparations for winter. Granaries filled, livestock sheltered, and patrols doubled along the borders. Yet, beneath the routine, tension whispers in the halls grew louder, and I sensed the unease in the way soldiers glanced at Vila when she passed. One evening, as I reviewed supply ledgers in my study, a messenger arrived with a sealed parchment from the southern nobles. The wax bore the seal of House Merrick, allies who'd fought beside us in the war. I broke it open, my father's presence heavy beside me as he paced the room. The letter was blunt. "The union with the orc defiles the Arden bloodline. Dissolve it, or face isolation in trade and arms. Peace cannot come at the cost of our honor." My father slammed his fist on the table, his face reddening. "Ungrateful curs. They sat safe in their manors while we bled on the front lines. Now they dictate terms?" He crumpled the letter, tossing it into the fire. "We'll stand alone if we must, Kyle. This marriage ends the war. They forget that too easily." I watched the parchment burn, flames licking the edges until the words stung, not because I cared for their approval, but because they echoed doubts I'd buried deep. Was I weakening our house, or saving it? That night, as I retired to our chambers, Vila was already there, sharpening her dagger by the hearth. She looked up, her green eyes reflecting the firelight. Word traveled fast in a fortress like this. She must have heard the rumors. She set the blade aside. "If you wish to annul the marriage," I paused at the door, surprised by her directness. "And break the treaty? Start the war anew?" She stood, her height making the room feel smaller. "Treaties are words on paper. If your people demand it, I will return to my clan. No blood need spill over one union." I crossed the... "You think I'd send you away because of a letter from cowards who've never faced an orc charge?" Then why endure the whispers? The stares? Her voice was even, but I detected an edge. Pride, perhaps. Or resignation. I met her gaze. Because it's not just duty anymore. You came here alone, left your clan to live among those who've killed your kin. You're not a prisoner, Vela. You're a bridge between our worlds. She stepped. A bridge? Or a chain binding you? No, I said firmly. What do you think I want from this? She tilted her head, considering. In my clan, such marriages are often tools for control. I don't want to control you, I replied. I want the war to end, not on paper, but in truth. No more graves, no more orphans. If that means standing against my own nobles, so be it. The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Viola didn't respond immediately, but she sat across from me, her posture less guarded. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something beyond duty in her eyes. Mutual respect, perhaps. We didn't speak more that night, but the tension eased, like a knot loosening in a rope. A week later, the fragility of our peace was tested. Scouts reported a band of human raiders, disgruntled mercenaries exploiting the chaos of the treaty, ambushing a supply caravan meant for both our lands and the Stonefang borders. The wagons carried grain and tools vital for winter survival. Word came at dawn. The raiders had struck hard, killing guards and fleeing into the hills. In the war room, my father and I gathered with the captains. We must pursue, I said. If they succeed, it'll embolden others, treaty or no. Viola, who'd joined uninvited but unchallenged, stepped forward. Let me lead the hunt. I know those hills from raids past. Your men are swift, but mine, my ways, could end this quickly. The room erupted. A grizzled knight scoffed. An orc leading human soldiers? She'd betray us. Another nodded. She's one of them. I raised a hand for silence, my voice steady. She's Lady Vela of Greyhaven. If she offers, we accept. This threatens both our peoples. The captains grumbled but relented under my father's glare. Viola met my eyes, a silent acknowledgement. We rode out at midday, a mixed force of 20, our archers and swordsmen, with Viola at the vanguard. The trail led to Red Scar Canyon, a narrow gorge of red rock and jagged cliffs, perfect for ambush. As we entered, the air grew thick with dust, the sun beating down like a forge hammer. The trap sprang without warning. Arrows whistled from the heights, horses rearing as men fell. "Form up!" I shouted, drawing my sword. Chaos erupted, raiders charging from hidden crevices, blades flashing. I parried a blow, my arm jarring from the impact, and thrust back, felling one assailant. But they outnumbered us, pressing hard. Then I saw Vela fight. She was a storm unleashed. Her axe swung in wide arcs, cleaving through armor like parchment. She moved with feral grace, dodging strikes. One raider lunged at her. She sidestepped, her dagger finding his throat in a blur. Another charged. She hurled him against the rocks with sheer strength. It wasn't savagery. It was precision, honed by years of survival. In the melee, an arrow grazed my shoulder, pain blooming hot. I staggered, another foe advancing with a raised sword. Before he could strike, Vela was there, her axe intercepting the blow. She shoved him back, finishing him with a swift stroke. "On your feet, Kyle." She barked, pulling me up. Her hand was strong, steadying me as we fought side by side. The battle turned. Our men, inspired or intimidated, rallied. The raiders broke, fleeing into the dust. We captured a few, the rest scattered. As the dust settled, I surveyed the scene, bodies strewn, blood staining the red earth. Vela stood amid it, her axe dripping, breaths heavy but controlled. Whose blood it was, ours, theirs, hers, I couldn't tell. She turned to me, wiping her blade on. "I chose to stay," she said simply, her voice carrying over the wind. In that moment, I saw her not as a symbol of the treaty, not as an orc warrior forced upon me, but as a person, fierce, loyal, burdened by the same weight I carried. We rode back in silence, the canyon fading behind us. That night, as I bandaged my wound, I realized we weren't just enduring each other. We were holding the peace together, and my respect for her deepened into something I couldn't yet name. Winter descended on Greyhaven like a heavy cloak. blanketing the plains in snow and frost that turned the river Valewind into a frozen vein. The peace had held through autumn's harvest, but the cold brought its own tests, short rations, howling winds, and the isolation that amplified doubts. Yet Vela remained. She didn't flee back to her clan's warmer mountain holds, as some whispered she might. Instead, she adapted, wrapping herself in our wool cloaks over her armor, her breath fogging the air as she joined the daily routines. Our shared life evolved in subtle ways. Mornings we'd break fast together in the hall, no longer at opposite ends of the table. I'd pour her ale, stronger than our wine as she preferred, and she'd pass me bread without a word. Language became our quiet bridge. I taught her the nuances of our tongue, words for ally versus friend, the polite phrases nobles use to mask disdain. In return, she shared orc phrases, her voice rumbling low as she pronounced harsh consonants. Cragthor, she said one evening by the fire, meaning unbreakable oath. I repeated it clumsily, earning a rare quirk of her lips. Not quite a smile, but close. The borders quieted under the snow. Patrols reported no raids, only tentative exchanges, our farmers trading grain for orc-forged tools at neutral outposts. I rode out once with Vela to witness it, a human merchant haggling with an orc trader over pelts. Nearby, children played in the drifts, human lads tossing snowballs at orc younglings, laughter echoing without fear. This, I murmured to her, is what peace looks like. She nodded, her eyes distant. Fragile, but real. One bitter night, as winds battered the fortress walls, I found her on the battlements, staring north toward the jagged peaks of her homeland. Snowflakes clung to her dark hair, melting on her green skin. She didn't turn as I approached, but she knew I was there, her senses sharper than mine. "Do you miss them?" I asked, leaning on the parapet beside her. "Yes," she admitted, her voice cutting through the gale. The fires of my clan halls, the songs of victory, the weight of familiar axes. I hesitated, the cold biting my cheeks. "Do you regret staying?" "No." She turned then, her eyes meeting mine, amber flecks glowing in the torchlight. Regret would dishonor the choice. We stood in silence, the snow swirling around us like unspoken thoughts. Then she spoke again, softer. "If the treaty shatters, I must choose a side." I felt a knot tighten in my chest. "I know. And I am not certain I could fight against both." Her words hung heavy, vulnerability edging her tone, a rare glimpse beneath the warrior's armor. I placed a hand on the stone wall, close to hers but not touching. "Then we ensure it doesn't shatter." She didn't reply, but she didn't move away either. We lingered there until the cold drove us inside, the moment etching itself into my mind. Vela wasn't just enduring Greyhaven. She was weaving herself into its fabric, and I into hers. A month later, the Stonefang delegation returned, not for war, but diplomacy. Word came at dawn, envoys bearing proposals for the first trade pact between our peoples. My father and I met them in the Great Hall. Banners of both houses hung side by side, a sight that would have been treasonous a year ago. The orc elders were grizzled, tusked figures in heavy furs, their leader an old warrior with scars like Vila's but deeper. Viola entered last, standing not behind me, but at my side as we faced them. The negotiations unfolded. Grain for iron, wool for spices, shared patrols on disputed trails. I argued points on borders, Viola on resources, her voice commanding respect even from her kin. As quills scratched the final terms, one elder pulled her aside, whispering in their tongue. I caught fragments, concern, perhaps doubt. She responded firmly, "I was not sent here." The elder nodded, a grudging approval in his eyes. As they departed, the hall emptied, leaving Viola and me alone. "What did he say?" I asked. "He asked if I was treated as kin or captive." She turned to me. I told him the truth. The changes rippled outward. Orc merchants appeared in our markets, bartering furs for tools under wary but civil eyes. Human caravans ventured north, returning with tales of orc hospitality, rough but honest. Greyhaven no longer felt like a besieged fortress. It breathed easier, its people glancing at Vela with curiosity rather than contempt. In our chambers that night, as the fire died to embers, she asked a question that lingered like smoke. In your people's tales, marriages like this, do they ever become more than duty? I sat up, the bed creaking under me. Sometimes, if both choose it. She regarded me, the distance between us on the mattress feeling smaller than ever. And you? Would you choose more? I didn't answer immediately, my heart pounding. Viola belonged here now, not as a stranger but as part of Greyhaven's beating heart. And in that belonging, my feelings had shifted, from respect to something warmer, deeper. I think, I said finally. I'm beginning to. She didn't press, but as we lay in the dark, the silence held promise. Winter's chill couldn't touch the warmth growing between us. 2 years had passed since that fragile wedding in the courtyard, and Greyhaven had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. The walls that once echoed with the clash of steel now rang with the laughter of children, human and orc alike, playing in the snow-dusted fields beyond the gates. Trade caravans rolled through the main road daily, orc merchants bartering furs and iron for our grain and cloth, their voices mingling with ours. No more raids scarred the horizon. The smoke that once choked the northern skies had given way to the steady plumes of hearth fires. Viola was no longer whispered about as the orc or the invader. She was Lady Vela now, her name spoken with a mix of respect and quiet awe by the very people who'd once gripped their spears at her sight. In the privacy of our chambers, though, titles fell away. There were no my lord or my lady between us. Just Kale and Viola, two people who'd started as strangers bound by duty and had somehow forged something real from the ruins of war. The massive bed we'd once shared like wary adversaries now felt like a sanctuary. Nights were quieter, filled with the crackle of the hearth and the soft rhythm of her breathing beside me. We'd talk until the candles burned low, about the day's patrols, the latest trade agreements, or the simple joys of a meal without She taught me orc words for things like steadfast and kin, and I showed her how to read our ledgers, her sharp mind grasping the numbers faster than most of my scribes. One particularly fierce winter night, snow fell in thick, relentless curtains, blanketing the fortress in silence. The wind howled against the shutters, but inside, the fire roared warmly. Viola sat by the window, her green skin. She wore one of my old cloaks draped over her armor, a habit she'd picked up in the cold months. I joined her, handing her a mug of spiced wine, and we watched the flakes dance outside. If things had been different, she said suddenly, her voice low and thoughtful. If I'd refused the marriage that day, what would you have done? I leaned against the sill, the cold seeping through the glass. I'd have had no choice but to ride to war. Lead the charge, perhaps, and in the chaos, I might have faced you across the battlefield. She turned to me, her amber eyes steady but shadowed. And killed me? The words hung between us, heavy as the snow. Possibly, I admitted, my throat tight. But you were never my enemy, Vela. You were just born on the other side of the line we drew in blood. She nodded slowly, setting her mug aside. In my clan, marriages like ours often begin as duty, a chain to bind two enemies, but they can end as choice, a real one. I felt my pulse quicken, the fire's warmth suddenly insufficient against the chill in my veins. What are you asking? She reached out, her large hand enveloping mine, calloused from years of axe and shield, yet gentle now. I'm asking if you would choose me still, not for peace, not for Greyhaven, but for us. The question pierced me deeper than any. I looked at her then, really looked. The warrior who'd crossed enemy lines to stand beside me, the woman who'd softened the edges of my world without demanding I change. Respect had bloomed into trust, trust into something warmer, steadier, a love not forged in passion's fire, but in the quiet forge of daily choice. I'd seen her laugh at a clumsy farmer's jest, comfort a grieving widow in the village, and hold my gaze through. She'd chosen Greyhaven, chosen me, when she could have returned to her mountains and her kin. I choose you, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. every day. Not because the treaty demands it, but because I can't imagine this life without you in it." Her grip tightened, a small smile curving her lips, rare but real. "Then we choose together." We didn't need grand declarations or vows renewed under starlight. In that moment, with the snow falling outside and the fire crackling within, it was enough. Peace wasn't a single document signed in a hall or a wedding sealed with reluctant words. It was this: two people from warring worlds deciding night after night to stay, to build, not break, to see each other not as orc and human, but as Kyle and Vila, partners in a fragile, hard-won future. The years ahead wouldn't be easy. Old grudges lingered in quiet corners, and new challenges would test us. Raiders testing borders, nobles stirring dissent, the weight of two cultures clashing in our home. But as I pulled her closer that night, her head resting against my shoulder, I knew we'd face them. Not as duty-bound strangers, but as equals who had chosen each other. Hundreds of miles away, in the Stonefang Mountains, her father might still wonder if, in our southern courts, whispers of the Orc Lady might never fully fade. But here, in Greyhaven, under the same roof where blood had once been spilled, we'd built something unbreakable. A peace not promised by kings or chieftains, but earned by two hearts that refused to let go. And in the end, that was the truest victory.